welcome to the Slow Pitch Podcast. Lane, how are we doing over there?
I'm doing great, Rob. How about you?
That's good. That's good. What do you want to talk about today?
Today, I'd like to talk about I've got a meeting with a new potential customer in a few days. When I was talking to the guy, we had a relatively short conversation with him, but it just kind of left me feeling a little uneasy. I don't know what it was about him, but he just wasn't very friendly. What do I do about that?
Well, there's a lot of not friendly people out there, so maybe it was just a bad day. Could it be that? Or was it like that's the way his attitude was, like all the way through?
Yeah, I didn't get the vibe from them that it was a bad day. It didn't sound like that. It just sounded like this is this guy.
Okay. Because I have that sometimes when I call people and it's like, man, I think I caught you on a bad day and it's not a good day. But what you're describing maybe sounds like a little bit of a personality issue. I don't know.
Definitely personality issue.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like there's a little, so here's a couple of thoughts here and just to put it into context here a little bit, I think what it might be is you might have encountered somebody with a D personality. And that requires a whole different set of skills than the other three personality styles that we usually would talk about or could talk about. And I know we've talked about DISC at a high level before in a previous episode, but we really get a chance to dive into each one very deep. So let's talk about how to deal with a high D personality so that you really don't mess this up in your sale. What do you think?
Sounds great.
All right, let's get started.
This is the Slow Pitch Podcast.
The question now is, what is a high D personality? For me, I think we should probably start with that, right? What does that mean? What's a D personality? Because, I mean, if you say that, I could think of a couple of other adjectives that might fit into that.
I was just about to say, I know a couple Ds myself.
Yeah. Yeah. But you know what? That's not exactly what this is all about. So, although when we go through this, you may go, you know what? I may disagree with that because sometimes that's how they come across a little bit. But really what it is if, let me ask you this, a couple questions here with this person that you had to deal with.
Sure.
How did they come across when you spoke to them? Were they were they really intense or did they feel a little laid back or did they, how did they feel?
Yeah, it was, he was, very, very quick and just matter of fact, just, all right, let's get through this. What are we doing? What are we talking about? What are we going to do? Just very curt, short, to the point.
Okay. And was he the type of person that was really like, get out of my way kind of a feeling? Like, I'm running the show here a little bit. Not you?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So it sounds to me like you have more of a D personality on the other end of the line than maybe what you might in the other profiles. And just to put it into perspective too, everybody can have more than one of these traits at any given time. So there's no locked in, hey, you're a D, or you're an I. Sometimes it's people have combinations. So for example, some people have a high D, but a secondary one that's a high C or an S or a C or an I. Any of those, they can have a combination of it. And they can also have a third personality style that can come out. And when they have the third one, it's less likely to show up, but it can happen. So when you have a high D, there's a couple of traits that we should probably talk about what they look like. So a high D is really a very strong-willed type of individual. They don't like a lot of help from the other people that are around them or even direct reports, believe it or not. They're very comfortable making decisions on their own. So if you're having a conversation with a person that's a high D and you're trying to come across or help them, guide them to an answer, you could run into a problem where they're feeling like, hey, you're trying to tell me what to do.
Yeah, that's interesting when they're coming to you asking for advice or information or help, but yet they act like they don't want it or need it.
Yeah, isn't that weird? But it is. And what that stems from what I understand, and I've heard a couple different people say this, that stems from this fear of loss of control and this fear of somebody else taking over their lives or taking over something of them. And it usually stems from something when they were younger. Now, what exactly that is, and if that's all totally accurate, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I will tell you this. It does feel that way when you're talking to some of these folks that there's a little bit of a, hey, I'm in control here and don't try to take that away from me. So if you work for a high D, and we'll get into that a little bit more in detail, they have to make decisions and they're the ones that have to be the ones making the decisions in a sense. If they're aware of the fact that they are not supposed to, as a leader, make those decisions and they should be letting their team make a decision, if they're working on it, it'll be very difficult, but if they're working on it, they will be able to adjust. And just like I said earlier, everybody can have multiple letters in their personality style. But just remember, when somebody has to act like a different letter, it takes thought, it takes forethought, it takes a little restraint. It's not an easy thing to do. So especially for a high D who's used to just basically steamrolling over people and
Right.
making just bodies everywhere, right? And that's fine. That's fine. That's the way they are. They're not always that way, but that's kind of, and all this is a little bit exaggerated, but understand this is what you can see when you pay attention. These folks are also really competitive when they're like trying to do things. What they'll try to do is they'll try to get their team, if they work with people working for them, what they'll try to do is have their team compete to get something done faster. They'll put this competition out there, and that can be really good and helpful, and that can be a little bit a detriment to them as well, because it's not about winning a game like that. It's about getting the right decisions.
Right.
The other thing they can be is a little bit demanding. And so does this person, when you spoke to them, do they sound like they were a little bit of a demanding kind of a person, or like, do they have like high expectations or?
Oh yeah. I think so.
Yeah. So, and I don't know if you remember any part of that conversation that you had with them, but when they talk about high expectations, like, do you have an example of what a high expectation they set for you that was a little bit strange and you weren't ready for in that initial conversation? Do you have any memory like that?
Yeah, he kind of has a fairly complicated website he wants redone. He seems to think it can be done in 6 weeks, and the degree of complication, we're talking months, if maybe even up to 6 months worth of work for this type of site. But yeah, it was a little unusual.
Okay, that sounds exactly right. I would be willing to bet he probably said to you, well, and the last guy did it in 6 months or 6 weeks or whatever, number of weeks that it was that he wants you to do it.
Yeah, I had to bite my tongue a little bit. Maybe that's why he's got all these problems. But
yeah, could be. All right, so that fits. And I think with those high expectations that they have of you, like, for example, when you have that high expectation of you, they also have that a little bit of themselves. I don't know if you know that, but they're like, I just want to be the best there is. I don't want anybody else to be better than me. It's usually based in some sort of fear, like I don't want to look bad, or they just don't want to feel like they're out of control, that kind of thing. And if you mess that up, you're pretty much on the outs then, right? They're gonna say see ya and get rid of you, and they're never gonna talk to you again, which is crazy because you might be fully capable of doing whatever job there is. But
so we've kind of covered kind of what this personality is. They don't sound entirely it's not entirely positive. So are there some strengths from a D that really shine?
That's interesting too, because you're right. There are some very good strengths that they have. And although they come across, what I just described a little bit, they come across as negative, there are some strengths that they have in terms of related to that. So for example, they like to speak very candidly. They'll speak in facts. They'll speak very directly. They're the kind of person that you'll know exactly where you stand at any given moment. So, for example, I think of a particular leader that's out there in the world today, or who by the time you listen to this, maybe in previous years, let's say, who will pretty much tell you like it is and say, I don't think you did a good job, or I don't believe what you said, or I don't like you very much, basically. And they'll say it very publicly. Folks like that are high D personalities because they speak as facts and there's no debate over it. They know this is the way they feel, and they want to make sure you know what they feel. They have a strength that is good because they like to talk and speak in factual language. I'm not sure, there's no waffling back and forth. It's either yes or it's no. Or if they have an alternate or a second personality, they could bring in some of that, but only because they don't have enough information that they should. But usually they can make decisions so quickly, it's not even funny. Like if they have 60% of the information they need, they'll say, good enough, I'll make a decision. The answer is, and whatever that is. And this is what we're doing. And even though
I stand by that no matter what.
Oh, yes. And yeah, and it doesn't matter. Even if the team says, oh, whoa, hang on. I don't think we thought about all this. And he's like, I don't care. You know what I mean? He or she, either one. And women can be high Ds as well. So don't take that away from any D, whoever they are, male or female. Don't take it away from them. They're good at making decisions. I respect it because as a person on the opposite end of the scale, I'll him and haw, try to make an analysis go on way
Yep.
too long, right? But this type of personality, you don't want to get in their way with that. So once they get to 50%, 60% decision, it's a go, and let's go. Get out of the way and make them understand that's a good decision. That's what we should be doing.
Prioritize your facts when you talk to them.
Essentially, yes. You want to make
Yeah.
sure that, but more important than prioritizing your facts, prioritizing what they want to know is even more important. They may say, I want to know X, and then I want to know Y, and then I want to know Z. Don't start at A, start at X and say, all right, let's talk about X then. And if somebody asks you as a high D personality and says, I want to talk about X, you can say, all right, let's talk about that. But before we do, why did you pick X to talk about first? Because you want them to explain what their rationale and their thought process is. And once you understand what that thought process is for that particular question, whatever that is, you'll actually get enough information to go, okay, here's what they need to know. And you can give them those answers and you can get those answers pretty quickly to them. And they'll go, okay, good. Let's move on to the next one. Because now they understand this is what that answer is and they understand how it affects them.
Right.
Slowing it down for them is slowing it down just enough for them to process and make decisions. And make sure that they have decided that that one issue or that one question is solved so that you can move on to the next question, their question or yours. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I think the other thing is that what's really interesting with them, because they decide very, very quickly, remember that they're the kind of people that will say, follow me, this is where we're going, versus what do you think we should do with this? So typically a high D, what I found, for example, one time I was in a retail operation one time. I was trying to open up a store and I was one of the many people that were in the team that was doing it. I wasn't running the store at the time. And the guy that was running the store was a bit of a high D. And what he said to us, we're going to do this whole event before we open. It's going to be internal. It's going to be for the corporate office to come in. We're going to do all these fun things, blah, 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 blah. And he's giving us, I want t-shirts. I want them to say this. I want you to do this. I want you to, and I want a band and I want this, I want chickens and whatever, he was coming up with all these weird things. You're like, and everybody was like, okay, is this real? Is this what we're doing? But guess what? That's what we were doing. He already planned it all out. Follow me. This is where we're going. This is what was happening. There's no real questioning. The only questions you're going to ask is, well, how many chickens did you want? That's really the question you're asking,
Yeah.
right? So when
how high do I jump?
Yeah, when you're working for a high D, that's what ends up happening. And when you're selling to a high D, it's a little bit the same way. But then you have to come back and ask the appropriate questions that relate to the problem and the pain that they're experiencing so that they can answer more clearly rather than saying, just do this and that's what I want. Because if he just says to you, hey, just make me a website. Well, it's not that hard. No, it's not that hard, but it's not going to be what you want.
Right, exactly.
So I can make you a website. I can make a simple website, one pager. What do you want it to say on it? Because it'll be one word. That's all it has to say. Right. But that's not what he wants. So you have to kind of figure out, well, how do we get through that part? And I think the other thing to do is not taking things personal from them, because they're the kind of person who, because they're the follow me kind of people, they're the ones that are so impersonal. They don't seem to get to know you very well, or they don't feel like they do, even though they probably do know you and they know your weakness very, very well. And they will push that button because they're good at knowing what people need to push and make things happen.
Motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. That said, don't take it personal. It's just the way they are. They're really transactional. They're more transactional than like personable, if you will. I think that's the best way to put it. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. You've kind of covered the positives. What about the real negatives? What are they not good at?
Well, there's a lot of things that they're not good at, as you probably got a feeling, and it comes across a little bit like they're negative kind of people, but they're really not. I mean, they think about the people that are out there that are high Ds. They're typically CEOs. They're people high ranking. They get stuff done for obvious reasons. Like, I'm not taking that from an answer. No, this is what we're doing. And they don't have a problem telling you that. So they're good in terms of running companies and running organizations. Sometimes they're not so good at hanging on to people, but that's what happens. So some of their weaknesses can be that they're not good at hanging on to people. They're not good at dealing with the personal stuff. They don't get involved in some of the decision making. So I had a D one time where I was talking to, and he's like, you know what? I've heard enough. I think we're going to go with this. That's perfectly fine. Now I need you to just work with the rest of the team. And like, we haven't gotten a contract signed or anything. I'm like, hold it here. So I had to stop and say, oh, hang on, before you take off. I just want to make sure I understand here. If when we get done with our meeting and the four of us sitting here, you've left now, just to make sure that I'm on the same page. I write this up right now as we've discussed right now. They can sign for it right now. Is that what you're asking me to do? Because I don't have a problem with that at all. And he goes, no, that's fine. Yep, they know what to do. They know the budget. We've already talked about all that. It's fine. Okay, because we had already as a group talked a little bit about the budget. We'd already talked about all the different elements that needed to go into it, and knowing what the deliverables were. He was just like, I'm done. I already made my decision up. The team needed more time, and he was okay with that. And he tossed it to the team. I just need to make sure that when he leaves, that they have the power to say yes. Yeah. And I think I even at the end of before he walked out and say, one last time, just before you leave, they're not going to have to take this to you afterwards, right? They're not going to have to say, okay, we got the information here, but let's take it to you one more time, Joe, or whoever it is, right? Because I need a final decision. They've got this, or do we need to have you just come back here in a few minutes? And he's like, no, I don't need to be involved. They can make the decision. That person right there can sign for it. I'm okay with it. It's fine. Okay. And when he left, everybody went, okay, good. We're good. Because they all knew that it didn't matter. They knew that he was on board and ready to go, and they would make the rest of it happen.
Right. Yep.
What also strikes me as interesting is that they don't like to get into the details of a lot of things. So they'll forget to tell you stuff if they give you directions, like your website guy. When he wants to build his website.
Oh yeah.
He won't tell you what color it is. He won't tell you he won't give you a color palette profile or branding guideline. He's not going to give you any of that. He's going to go
not until it's done.
This is not right. Yeah, that's what he's going to do. He's like, well, this is not what I want, right? So you're going to have to pull a lot from them. They're big picture people. They're the ones that just like, I've got this whole idea. I want to go here and I want to go there. So when I was in retail, I also had this bit of a D personality, because you end up growing the D personality, whether you like it or not, when you're running a store. And I remember one time, every week we'd have these big sales every week, because not one particular item on sale. And one week we had cereal on sale. And I said to the guy that was running my supermarket area, I said, what I would like to have is a big cereal display in the very front of the store as you first walk in. And then above that, I want this big, this is crazy. I said, I know it's crazy. And I said, I want this big bowl hanging there. And I said, you know how they got these things where there's a faucet and the water's running, but the thing, it looks like it's hanging there by itself and the water's running the whole time?
Yeah.
I wanted that in the front of my store. And he's like, I can't do that.
Where do you find that? Yeah.
Yeah. That's what he's like, where am I supposed to find this? But again, this is a D personality going, this is what I want. No, he didn't end up doing it, but he did build a cool display that I would have not come up with. And it was probably better than my idea, but the idea was give him something bigger to stretch for, and he would go do it. So there's a D personality. That's one of those strengths, is they'll make you stretch a little bit. And that's one of those positive things. On the weak side is they won't give any details and they won't tell you what to do to get there. The other thing they like to do is just kind of give away the responsibility. They'll give it to everybody else. And then when it comes right down to it, just like you said with the website, is they'll come back and go, that's not what I want, because they're the final say, right? So
right.
Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Now, back to the show.
So we talked about the good and the bad about a D personality. I guess one thing we haven't kind of talked about is what really motivates them, what makes them tick.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that really drive them. One is if there's a deadline coming up, they will make it happen. Like, they're good at getting things done, and they're proud of it, and they want to be able to talk about, hey, I did this. And you notice it's all about I.
Yeah,
and that's okay. That's okay. Because when they say I, in their head, they're thinking we, but they just don't say it out loud because they don't want to give credit always.
Right.
Listen, again, I'm going to the extremes. This is not the real absolute hardcore. This is what they're like, but it is a taste and a feel for what they're like. And you'll know what they look like and feel like when you're selling to them, because that's what it feels like. It's I. There's no we, there's all me. I did this. The other thing is they like to just, they'll make a decision very quickly. And they want to make that decision quickly. And I don't care if they have all the information or not. I know we talked about that earlier as one of their strengths, but that's their end game. That's what they were getting to. There's nothing better than going to their checklist and going, check, done. That's good. I'm done with that one.
You call that a strength, but I personally would call that a weakness, because and maybe that's just my personality trait, as a C, without all the facts, how do you know you're actually making the right decision? You get through 60% of the facts and you make a judgment.
There's a lot of variation.
Right.
There's a lot more that can go wrong with that last 40%.
Yep.
They don't care. You know why? Because if they've seen enough, so they'll make the decision. What feels like to you is only on 60% of the information. To them, it feels like I've seen this before. We're at 85%. That's good enough. Let's go. And that's the difference, is what their approach is and what their feeling is toward the amount of data they have. They feel like, I know I don't have all the information, and I never will. I could do this all day long, but it doesn't really matter. I've seen this before and I know enough. If they don't know or they haven't seen it before, it changes a little bit. But for the most part, their goal is to make a decision. That's what drives them a lot, is just making decisions and making decisions for other people. One time I had a potential client say that they make the decisions for their team, that they'll get it done. And even if the team doesn't, they're going to make sure that it gets done. Their thing is all about getting things done, getting it over the finish line, driving it to the end. Now, I say that, but at the same time, it's not an easy relationship, but sometimes high D's and high C's working together will give you a better benefit and a better value long-term as a company, so that everything looks like it's supposed to and goes like it's supposed to. When you did your call, my guess is you probably got on the phone with somebody that was high ranking in the company.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So those are usually the situations. They're usually the CEOs, the founders,
exactly.
A lot of time. Yeah. Okay. And sometimes lawyers, if you ever noticed, I
can see that.
They can be high Ds as well, because they're make decisions. One of the things that I wrote down as a high D for when we talked about this was just even operations guys, people that are managing other people. If you're a good, strong operations person, you should be able to make decisions quickly. And I've just seen it too many times that those are all the roles that ends up coming in. Even thinking about the police officers, have you ever noticed?
Oh, yeah.
They don't take crap from anybody, right? No, this is what you're doing. Okay, guess that's what we're doing. That's kind of the personality you need to think of when you have a high D. So I hope that helps. That gives you a little indication of who they are, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's very helpful. I want to bring this back to the whole point of us being here. How do I sell to these guys? How do I sell to a D?
Here's my best advice that I can give somebody that's trying to sell to a D. Stay out of their way. And here's what I mean. Even with all these descriptions, it's really tough to know if they're a high D. And so I don't want you to just talk to somebody on the phone and assume they're a high D. If you're cold calling, they may sound like somebody who's a high D, but quite honestly, it's just somebody that just is bothered and they're like, don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to you. And that's not really a high D. That's just somebody being rude to get you off the phone, right? So, so when you deal with a D, then you're going to need to verify this, I think, to me, when you're talking to somebody on the phone or when you're your first meeting. If you're not sure, although you have a feeling that they're high D, what you might start to do is ask some preliminary questions that say something along the lines of, when I've had these meetings before, sometimes I talk to somebody and they just need the high level. They want to see, what does this mean? Or what is my service all about? Really high level. What is it that you can do for me? And that's really what they want to know. And we'll get into a little bit of detail, but most of the questions are going to be about stuff that are high level. And then I have other people that kind of say, listen, I kind of have an idea of what you do, but I want to know, what are some of the details that you're going to cover for me? Let's get into the granular side of things. Let's really get into the nitty gritty, the details of this, and really have to ask that question of, which side are you on? Are you a high level person, or are you more of the detail kind of a person? And by asking that question, their answer will tell you, are they high D or are they not a high D? Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think if they're a high D, then you'll know pretty quickly by that answer. If they start saying things like, well, I need to bring in the team, or I need to do with other people, or if you're sitting there in your first meeting and 4 other people are sitting there with you, they're probably not a high D. You would think that they are. Now, when you start talking, you'll verify if they are and if they come across as a D with their team or not. But a lot of times, if they're bringing the whole team in on the first meeting, they're not a high D. They'll bring the team in later and say, okay, this is what we're doing. Let's talk some details and let them work it out and hash it out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then sometimes when you're sitting in the meeting, if you're paying attention, do they need other people's opinions? Do they need to look up something on their computer to figure out if is this accurate, or want to know, am I saying this right? Because a high D is like, I don't care if I say it right or not. What I said is what it is, right? Versus somebody that's not a high D, they may go, you know what, let me check on that. I don't know the answer, and then look it up and then give you the right answer. So there's a different ways that you can ask questions to start to understand who they are. So then they're a high D. How do you sell to them? And the other way you're going to know that they're high D is they're going to go, you don't need to kind of nudge them along, they're nudging you. That's the other way to do it.
Right,
so
yeah.
It's kind of a feel. You'll feel it all the way through. So the way that you're going to sell to these folks is think about in terms of where they are and where they're ready to buy. So sometimes I say to somebody, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to buy, right? And sometimes that question, and I wouldn't word it quite like that, but it's something like what I'm trying to say, right? So I'm trying to get a gauge for where they are. I'm not saying that you're going to ask this question early on or during your sales process, but what you're going to do is you're going to have to give this feel for how excited are they to buy? How many buying signals are they giving you and saying, this is, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go, ready to go? And how many are they saying in terms of signals, I don't trust you yet. I don't think it's right. I'm not time. It's not time. It's not time. It's not time. Right? You'll feel it as you talk. And when you're dealing with high Ds, they're going to push. They're going to push to the let's go, or they're going to push get out. One of the two.
Right.
Push to buy or push get out of my office. And
you'll know there is 0 or a 10.
Yeah, there is no in between on those folks usually. If you feel like they're on the push to the buy side, then you just need to get more toward the, I'm not sure it's a good time. And I'm not sure you're ready to buy kind of an attitude. Because the more that you stay, in a sense, behind them in the way that they're buying, in the way that they're heading towards their attitude towards the sale, the more that you do that, the more likely that they're going to make a decision and buy. Or if they feel like they're the kind of person that's on the more on the other side, which is on the 0 side, which is, I don't think I really want to buy. This is the way it feels, right? Without saying it, then your job is to stay further away from that. So if they say, I'm not sure this is all fitting into what our scope is looking for or what we imagined this being in terms of the project, it doesn't look like this is working very well. You could tell they're not ready to buy, right?
Yep.
So your answer is going to have to be something along the lines of, I didn't think so. I feel like this is not a very good fit here. I don't feel like it's fitting in very well. Should we just kind of call it? Like, they want to make a decision, so call it for them. And I say call it for them, but tell them, I understand, I'm here with you.
Right.
And they'll have no problem telling you, yeah, let's call it. Done. All right, great. Well, I really appreciate your time. Folks like that, when they're ID and they're in that position, call it and let them say, yep, I'm good. Make the decision. Help them make the decision by getting them to that point. If they're on the other side and they're ready to buy and you say, is there anything else that you can think of that we should be talking about? Because I feel like there might be another question in there. I know you've got a lot of great questions. I mean, are you sure this is the right direction you want to go? And what does that do? When they're a very confident decision maker,
yep,
this is the way I want to go. They say,
there's no uncertainty here. Yeah.
Yeah. Why are you even asking me that question? Right. But the more that you stay to their, I wouldn't say subservient level, but you're going to be a little behind them. You're going to be the one that's going to be having to be pulled along. And all along the sale, you should be pulled along, whether it's a D, an I, an S, or a C. It doesn't really matter. Each of them are going to need you to be pulled, not push them ever, never, ever push them, because they will not buy when you push every time, or they delay. And if you're pushing somebody in another type of disc profile, they'll delay. And when that happens, you might be in trouble.
I can see that, and it makes me think of when I was out buying a car, and I went in wanting to look at one model, and they didn't want to show me that model. They wanted me to buy a different model.
Nice.
They talked me into test driving, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great car, but that's not what I want.
Yeah.
And very suddenly, they were not willing to talk about a deal at all. So
wow,
that it was very easy for me to make that decision. Yeah, all right, I'm out of here. I'm off to the next dealership.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in that scenario, you are the buyer and you're trying to push to go in a direction and they're trying to pull you in a different direction. That's a little bit of a turnoff. So when I say get behind them or stay away from getting in their way of going towards that level 10, if you will, it's not so much about not showing them what they want to see, right? It's the feeling that you had, which was, all right, that's crazy. I don't want to deal with you people. I'm talking, these are the kind of individuals that you want to stay out of their way to make a decision. So when they're deciding they don't want to go in the sale direction, help them decide this is not a sale for you. If they're heading in the direction of I want to buy, help them decide that they want to buy by questioning and pulling back and pulling them away from that sale a little bit, because the more that you pull them away, the more that they feel like I want to buy this. I want to buy this. Right. It's kind of, I know it's weird, but when you're dealing with a high D in a sale, it's kind of like when you go out dating, and the harder you are to acquire, meaning you don't answer your phone very easily. You that little cat and mouse game that's happening in the beginning of any relationship where you go on your first date and then you don't call. Like, what's the rule? Like, is it 2 days, 3 days? Everybody's I don't know. Should I call? That's the whole game. And it's the same thing in sales in a sense. help them understand that that's the right decision by asking a few more questions and making sure they're confident. So I hope that helps. Does that help you with a high D personality?
Yeah, I think I'm much more prepared for this meeting next week. So thank you.
All right, until next time. See you later.
Later.
Thank you for listening to The Slow Pitch. Do you have a question about sales? Call or text your question at 608-708-SLOW. That's 608-708-7569. Or you can email them to questions@theslowpitch.com. Slow down and close more.